The Doghouse podcast is back. Got a great return guest, Jay Will from the Film Guy Network, and they are growing there. How are we doing today, Jay? Will?
I'm doing fantastic,
Jay
man.
Will or you like Jonathan? Sorry.
People go Jay, people go Jay Will, Jonathan. It doesn't matter to me. I get all three thrown at me, so either one of those works for me. But I'm doing great, man.
Man.
Glad that football is back. Spring football is in full force in Athens. So excited to do this with you, and glad you asked me to come back on.
Yeah, really appreciate you coming on. Excited to talk about that. First off, because it's rare for Georgia, but it's not confirmed yet, but it's looking really good for Georgia basketball. 20-11. As I mentioned earlier when we were talking, they went 2-9 down the stretch. I kind of gave up on them, but got hot at the end and won 4 straight. And I think that Florida really put them back in it and looked good against Vanderbilt, kind of a dangerous South Carolina team on the road. So what's your thoughts on this team? Looks like they got Oklahoma tonight. Mike White's got them rolling. And what's your thoughts on the Dogs in basketball?
Hey, look, first off, I love a good hoops question. On our show, the Film Guy Network, we're pretty much strictly football. Brooks and Kirby, they're football guys, but I'm a hoops guy. That's what I grew up playing. So anytime I get to talk some Georgia hoops, I'm happy to do it. They certainly caught a streak here at the end of the season. It did look like for a little bit that Mike White and their team was going to miss out on March Madness yet again. And then the upset over number 3 Florida, one of the biggest victories in program history. Then they go and defeat Texas, and they pick up 2 more key wins to end the season as well. So a really strong ending to the season. I think a lot of credit goes to how Silas Demery has played over these last 4 games, averaging over 20 points per game. I want to say was SEC Player of the Week at one point as well. I think that's been a big indicator and a big shift for them. Asa Newell, the freshman, obviously has played great for them all year, but they've gotten some big minutes for some big guys. And the fact that they're closing out and staying strong in the second half, that's been probably the biggest change for them, because they took multiple leads in the second half this season against multiple teams, and they just couldn't close them out, or they just couldn't keep it within a margin that was worth striking there in the late game. So it does look like they're going to be back in the dance for the first time since 2015. I believe Joe Lunardi with ESPN has them penciled in as a 9 seed right now, kind of depending on what they do in the conference tournament. But I think they could honestly lose against Oklahoma and they would be fine. It seems like they're in a really good spot right now. Hopefully they don't get the drawing that they are predicting them to get, playing UConn in the first round. That'd be a tough one to go against Hurley and those guys who have been very successful the past couple of years. But exciting times for Georgia basketball.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear on that. I did want to ask, so about the Silas Demery, because I agree with you. I think he's been the difference maker. Where was he earlier in the season? Was he in the rotation, or he didn't get a lot of minutes? How was that going?
No, yeah. I mean, for the last 2 seasons, he's been the starting point guard. Obviously a sophomore this year, but I think you've just kind of seen where he started building upon this confidence. I mean, getting that win over Florida, and then he builds upon it against Texas. And I think that's kind of something, at least from what I have noticed as a viewer of Georgia basketball this season, is there isn't a whole lot of confidence. There isn't a whole lot of continuity in the offense. And there really isn't this guy, or hasn't been this guy in the offense that you can just kind of give the ball to say, hey, we need a bucket. Let's go get it. He's kind of turned into that for them, because teams, of course, are honing in on Asa Newell. They're kind of figuring out that if we can stop him, maybe we'll fare pretty well against him. But the fact that Silas has really added into the mix here as late has been massive for them. Also, Tyron Lawrence, the transfer from Vanderbilt, he's been huge since he came back from his injury as well. So getting those key guys, those 3 guys, and also adding in minutes from Dylan James. And I think they've kind of tightened down the rotation a little bit as well, Mike White has. Yeah. And I think they've kind of found a group that they think works really well, and something that they could really build with going into March Madness and maybe even win a couple games.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. Also, I think Blue Kane, great name, but he'll get hot every now and then, and he'll do his thing. Absolutely. It frustrated earlier in the year. Like, they'd look really good, like I said, in the first half, and then they would just turn the ball over, and it's just frustrating. Just bad passes and just frustrating, but undisciplined. But great to see him in there. And then, what would you like to actually see? Maybe win one game in the SEC tournament and they can rest their legs, because I think Mike White was just saying they're a tired team. Or would you like to just maybe see them lose to Oklahoma, call that a day, and look for seeding? Or what would you like? What would be best case scenario?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough because really, especially with basketball, and this can be said with all sports, I think you kind of saw it in college football this past season as well, of it really doesn't matter what you do in the regular season, but it's kind of about the team that gets hot late in the season. That's what Ohio State did. That's kind of what led them to win a national title despite dropping 2 games in the regular season. So I think that you kind of want Georgia to stay on this streak. So I think you definitely would like to see them beat Oklahoma. They have the late game tonight, so that's kind of a factor in this as well. If they're playing the last game in the bracket today, so I think you do kind of want to see them keep that momentum. So maybe pick up a win against Oklahoma. But I mean, it's a tough bracket. The SEC is what people say the deepest conference that they've ever seen in college basketball history. So I think you want to see them pick up some, keep momentum, keep it rolling for them. And you don't want to say too, like you want them to lose, but I don't think some time off or at least a little couple of days off for them wouldn't be too bad. And I don't think anybody has the expectation that Georgia's going to go in there and win the whole thing. But I think at least picking up a win or two, I think that kind of continues this building confidence that they have and still puts you in a really good standing going into the tournament.
Completely agree. And would you like to maybe them to see? I know it's all about seeding and who they play. Do you think it'd be better maybe even be that 10th seed and play the 7th seed, then the 9th and 8th? Because I always hear that's a tough matchup.
Yeah, I mean, really, I don't think I have a preference for which seeding they get. I think it really just depends on which team they're going to be facing in that first round. Like I said previously, right now, a lot of people have them facing UConn, which UConn hasn't been this season what they have been in years prior. But still, I mean, a really well-coached basketball team, one of the best coaches in all of college basketball. So that'd be a tough draw for Georgia. So whether it's the 10 seed, the 9 seed, or anywhere in that range, I don't think it matters. But all that really you care about is who do you draw in that first round and who kind of is around that bracket for you as well.
Yeah, completely agree. But, yeah, go Dogs, man, and it'll be great to see them. If they get 1 or 2 wins, that'll be ecstatic.
Mm-hmm.
And then side note, so I live here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was at the YMCA uptown here working out. You know, they usually have basketball pickup games. I don't play or anything. But anyway, I just noticed these 1 or 2 guys coming in last night, and I was like, man, those are not normal. And it looks like he's 6'8", 6'10". Then all of them came in, they were like clapping. Anyway, long story short, Stanford University was there, and I looked them up, and I was like, what are they doing here? And they're in the ACC tournament. I even forgot they're in the ACC, but playing California. But just how big the D1 guys were when you see them up close, and it's like, wow, everybody kind of in the gym just kind of stopped watching them, and I think they even have like maybe the ACC scorer of the year. I don't really know much about Stanford anyway. That just kind of stood out last night, how big they were, and when you see them up close, in the gym.
Yeah, I mean, that goes for football, basketball. Oh, yeah. I mean, those 2 sports alone. I mean, it's one thing to watch these guys on TV sitting from your couch, but I mean, you get up close on these guys, it really kind of puts into perspective of what separates a guy like me who played 4 years in high school and didn't achieve anything after that in sports to these guys that are playing college basketball. Also think it's hilarious the fact that you mentioned that Stanford and Cal have to come all the way to Charlotte, North Carolina to play in their conference tournament. Just a crazy time of college sports that we live in.
It is. You kind of forget they're in there, and it was interesting. Right before we get to some football talk, though, wanted to give a great shout out to our great sponsor, VivaTequilaSeltzer.com. 0 carbs, 0 sugar. Great for a golf tournament coming up or golf game. Also great for tailgating, and you can get them at the beach when spring break comes up. But for 20% off, Doghouse 20% off. I like the watermelon and elderberry, and huckleberry is my favorite. So check them out. Great sponsor of the podcast this year. And then Jay Will, I know you just were coming back covering for Film Guy Network, Georgia Pro Day. What did you observe? And then also when I listened to Kirby last night, he said he wasn't there, and I don't know if he was probably busy with spring practice or whatever. That was kind of interesting. But who kind of stood out, or what did you get to see for Georgia Pro Day?
Yeah, it sounds like Kirby had some type of event that he had to go to. Didn't exactly say what it was, but he just mentioned that he had somewhere to be, that he wasn't going to be at the pro day. So no Kirby Smart today, but obviously it was a big day for Chaz Chambliss and Dan Jackson, and also Ben Urosic, the tight end. Those are 3 guys that did not get invited to the NFL Combine. Really, Dan Jackson, the one that really surprised people that didn't get an invite. A former walk-on, but certainly a draftable player, a guy that people are saying could very well end up in that 3 to 5 or even 6 round range. Started multiple years for Georgia and was an impact player, perhaps the most consistent player for Georgia this past season as well. So, I mean, a standout player and not getting an NFL combine invite was certainly a surprise. But a big day for those two guys. Dan ran well. I believe the reports where he ran 4.4. Ben Urosic ran really well. He recorded a 4.6, I believe is what sources were saying. So 2 big days for those guys. Chaz Chambliss did 30 reps on the bench press. He moved really well. So it was all around great day. I think the best thing about Pro Day and what a lot of fans really enjoy about these sort of events is knowing which quarterback is going to go out to the throw. If you remember correctly, a couple years ago, it was Carson Beck that was throwing to the likes of George Pickens at Pro Day, kind of his first introduction to fans during that time. Gunnar Stockton got the nod today. So seen a little bit of Gunnar. Obviously, the past couple of games, he got put in the second half in the SEC championship game and then started for the Sugar Bowl. But another look at Gunnar, I think the first thing that pops off with him is that he can put it just about anywhere. I mean, he's got all the arm strength in the world. He certainly showed that off with some of his deep balls, and I thought he did a really good job playing on time with the wide receivers today, getting a good look at Dominic Lovett and Arian Smith, 2 guys that are going to be in the draft this year as well. So a big day for Gunnar. I think there is maybe still some questions about whether or not he can layer the football, but if it's a go ball or something that he can really stand on and put some horsepower into, he can put it pretty much anywhere he wants to. And I think it still kind of puts him in a position of it is Gunnar's football team. Gunnar is likely going to be the starter this year, but certainly still a situation worth monitoring this spring of Ryan Puglisi and Gunnar, just kind of seeing the development of both of these guys over the next couple of months. Malachi Starks continuing Pro Day. He looked good as always in field drills. He had a couple of nice high point drills that they did with him, even one where he intercepts the ball down the sideline and even jumps over the rope that they had over there on the sideline, just showing off his athleticism. And just, always good to talk to the guys one last time before they head off to the NFL. Guys like Mike Hell, Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson, Jared Wilson, Tate Rowledge, all those guys. Just really good to see them one last time in some Georgia gear before they start this next transition into their careers. But, yeah, first time going to Pro Day for me, but I thought it was an all-around great experience. I'm sure a lot of Georgia fans will be glad to hear, too, that there are quite a few Atlanta Falcons representatives and coaches, including Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris there, checking out some of the Dogs. So might be a good indicator of maybe where they're heading in the first round.
Yeah, that was I actually had a Scott Vaughn from Falcons SI, and we were talking about that whole thing, why Georgia players haven't been picked, and he was mentioning Mekhi Williams or Malachi Starks could be there at 15. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely.
In your opinion, what's the chance of how many Dogs get going in the first round potentially?
Yeah, I think it is just really 3 guys. I think it's going to be Jalen Walker. I think it's going to be Mykal Williams. And I think it is going to be Malachi Starks. There has been a little bit of a discussion of if Malachi is going to fall to the second round. Nothing to his own. I think really it just has to do with the fact that South Carolina safety Nick Emanwari tested out of this world at the NFL Combine. And people are kind of penciling him in now as the number 1 safety. But him and Starks are the clear-cut top guys at that position. And from what I've heard, people still say that Malachi is the safest pick, perhaps in this entire draft. That was something that Jeff Ulbrich said today at Georgia's Pro Day while Malachi was out doing his work of that guy looks like he might be the safest pick. So I think that those are the 3 guys. I think those are going to be 3 first-round picks as well. So maybe not the 5 that you had in previous years from Georgia's defense, but still a really strong group representing the program this year of the draft.
Yeah, that's awesome. 3 still great. And then did have a question back to like Dan Jackson and some of those guys. If you didn't go to the Combine, can you still possibly get picked up by a team, or how does that work? Or you have to go through the Combine? How's that work? Use it for like unrestricted free agents?
Oh no, I mean, yeah, he can absolutely be picked up. I did have someone ask me like, how often does it happen where a guy that doesn't get invited to the Combine actually gets selected in the NFL draft or like before the 7th round? I don't have any actual data on that, but I would have to imagine that if Dan Jackson is selected again in that 4th round range, it would probably be considered a bit of an anomaly for a guy like that to not get invited to the Combine and then turn into a day 2 pick potentially, or even a day 3 guy. So I think that he is going to fit in. I think that Dan is going to be one of these guys that just continues to hang around on NFL rosters, because I think he has proven that he adds a lot of value, certainly has the measurables, and he certainly has the ability to play against some of the top talent in the country. He proved that in the SEC these past couple of years and made some humongous plays for Georgia this past season. I mean, you don't win the Georgia Tech game without Dan Jackson. And again, I think he was the most consistent player on defense for Georgia this past season, maybe outside of Christian Miller, who was phenomenal for Georgia up front.
Yeah, maybe even that first Texas game. What do you have? 4 tackles in the pick. I know it
Yeah,
was
I
on the
mean, it
road.
was any big moment that you needed. It seemed like 17 was plugging his nose in somewhere.
And yeah, and I'll always remember Shannon Sharp on his podcast. He goes, 17. He's going to play on Sundays. Watch,
Yeah,
he'll lay the lumber, man. So
absolutely, he
always,
will.
that was good. And then speaking of spring practice coming up, what are some of the position battles that you're interested in seeing?
Yeah, I think that interior defensive line, I don't know if I'd call it a position battle, but it kind of is because we know that Christian Miller is going to be one of those guys that is going to be consistently in the lineup. But I mean, losing Warren Brinson and Azir Stackhouse, and you can kind of even throw Michael Williams a little bit in this conversation. TID also leaving this year to go to the NFL draft. You lost quite a few guys up front. It's time for guys like Nasir Johnson to maybe step up. Jordan Hall is certainly a name I'm paying attention to, a guy that's been on this roster for the past couple of years. Really need him to take that next jump into a new role for them. I think they've got some great bodies up front, certainly some big guys. Jordan Thomas, another one of these players. So I think it's a big spring for them, just kind of figuring out who are going to be the players that we plug in. Sticking with up front defensively, I think defensive end and Jack, it's the thinnest that Georgia has ever been at those two positions. You lose Chaz Chambliss, you lose Michael Williams, Damon Wilson goes to Missouri. So right now it's Gabe Harris is going to play one of those, but he's also banged up, so you're probably not going to get a good look at him this spring. You're kind of focusing in on maybe Quintavious Johnson. Is he going to emerge into one of these roles? He better, because he has to. You're going to have to play him this year. And then JJA, who's still kind of banged up as well. So you're not getting a lot of reps from him this spring either. But that spot specifically, I think, is one that people are really circling in on, one that I'm certainly paying attention to this spring, because you got to have people step up. You got to have these pass rushers, and you don't know who Georgia's best pass rusher is right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's one I didn't really think about. The two that I was kind of worried about is looking at it as running back. All right, so Nate Frazier kind of being your number one, but you still got Branson Robinson dealing with PCL. He's been out, always injury prone. Roderick Robinson with the toe and the ankle, and then you kind of unproven after that. Should Georgia fans be worried about it? And then also O-line, losing 4 out of 5 starters and a bunch of inexperienced guys. That's kind of what I'm worried about. But
yeah, I mean, offensive line is certainly one too. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. If you lose that many starters in a season, and also not only that, but the offensive line play in general this past season wasn't to the typical Georgia standard, wasn't as consistent as maybe you would like to see them. So again, a lot of young guys are going to be thrown in there. But I think it's also good because Monroe Freeling isn't going to be a major participant in this season. You kind of know what he is. He's going to be a starter for Georgia this year. So another spot where some of these younger guys can get a lot of reps this spring, and you can kind of build them up, build that stamina up, and get them a lot of reps to get them ready for the season. Because as we've learned, I mean, you're going to get banged up at some point at the offensive line. So you're going to need those two deep guys to be ready to play and be plugged in at any moment. So offensive line, certainly one to pay attention to. And then running backs, I mean, you got Nate Frazier, you got Cash Jones, but I think it's kind of like Nate Frazier, keep him in bubble wrap. We don't need him to get injured. I think it feels like it's been forever since Georgia has had their number one option at running back healthy week 1. So you certainly need him to stay healthy, but a big spring for a guy like Chauncey Bowens, who maybe could be fighting for that number 3 spot behind Cash Jones and Nate Frazier, while Branson and Roderick are both dealing with their injuries and rehabbing back, getting those guys ramped up for the season. So I think you still have plenty of bodies at running back, but still some questions of, is Roderick Robinson going to turn into what he was, or return to what he was and what he showcased against Florida State in the Orange Bowl? Is Branson Robinson going to return to form that he showed during his freshman season? I think you saw a little bit of that in his final game before he got hurt last season. It seemed like he was kind of adjusting back and getting ready and turning back into game form, and then he goes down with another injury. So I think it's just a matter of getting those guys back and figuring out if you do have some solidified answers there. But again, a big spring for a guy like Chauncey Bowens to earn some more reps.
yeah, Chauncey Bowens. How about Dwight Phillips? I know he's kind of more of a speedster, kind of gadget guy. Maybe see him a little bit.
Yeah, I think that Dwight Phillips is going to be a guy that they use in situations like they did against Florida last year, where maybe you're on the goal line, you give him in around and say, who's going to run with him? I don't think anybody can. Maybe you see him involved a little bit more in the passing game. I don't know if he is ever going to be like a first down, second down back, or even a third down back, anything like that. He's not a guy that you're going to be giving 10 carries a game to, but certainly a guy that is very, has a lot of uses and a guy that you can get very creative with. And I think that we were kind of seeing Mike Bobo and that staff get creative with his usage until he also got banged up a little bit last year. Didn't get to see too much of him. So I think that you'll see maybe some more inclusion of him in the game plan, but you got a lot of guys on offense that you're trying to get involved in the game plan this year.
Yeah, that'd be good to see. Probably they're going to throw it around a lot on the spring game as usual.
Yeah,
which would be good. And then I guess I know it's early. What is it? Second day? Any like early buzz or anybody from the winter workouts or any of the freshmen? They're kind of standing out.
It sounds like that Zachariah Branch is certainly already flashing a little bit in practice, so that's a good sign. Something I heard is KJ Bolden put on some good weight this offseason, which he was a striker last year, even though he was weighing maybe 185 pounds. He looks like a stick out there as a freshman, but he certainly plays like he weighs 205 pounds. So sounds like he put on some good weight there. And it kind of sounds like Georgia's just focusing in on getting back to the basics a little bit, making sure that they are executing before they establish anything else. The bottom line is this spring, you feel like they got to really focus in on, you got to run the football well, and you got to stop the run. Two things that Georgia is typically really good at, but last year, very inconsistent in both areas. They gave up some gashers on the ground last year and certainly wasn't the typical Georgia run defensive standard. So I think they're kind of getting back to those two things. But, yeah, still a little bit early to get any inklings. No practice today, I don't believe, but there will be practice availability tomorrow, which I will be attending. So I'm sure we'll get some more intel on that and figure out who really is some of the standouts so far.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see. I know it's still early on. And then I know all the Georgia fans, last week when the news came out, our website came out, were you surprised there hasn't been hardly any staff changes? I know they've added an analyst or two, but nothing changed. Were you surprised that overall? I thought maybe there would have been at least one big change, but
if anything, I would have maybe expected someone to get plucked from the staff, someone hiring away another guy. But Georgia has done a really good job, and Kirby Smart specifically has done a really good job of holding on to his staff members. Even during their national title run, they were losing coaches here and there. Fran Brown obviously going to Syracuse for a head coaching job. You lose Dan Lanning to Oregon, but outside of that, you've done a really good job of holding on to some of your key staffers. I didn't expect there to be any changes really though on the staff. You could say what you want about Mike Bobo, you can say what you want about Stacey Searles, but everything that I have heard, especially talking to the guys at the NFL Combine this year, those guys love both Bobo and they love Stacey Searles, especially the offensive lineman. They certainly do seem to appreciate what Searles provides in that room. And Kirby Smart certainly seems to like Mike Bobo as well. You could say it's blind loyalty, but if what people classify as the number one coach in college football and a guy that won back-to-back titles, if you're still at this point and entering season 10, I believe, of Kirby Smart's tenure at the University of Georgia, if you're questioning his judgment, I have questions on you as a fan of your judgment as well, because it seems like he does a really good job of making decisions every single year.
Completely agree. 2 national titles, you got to let him do his just, but yeah. I do think it'll be for those two you mentioned, Stacey Searles and Mike Bobo. We'll just say you need to have an improvement, which hopefully
absolutely. You got to see some improvement in both areas there. Can't have another season where you're very inconsistent on both offense and also on the offensive line. But based on how that they recruited the offensive line, based on some of the additions they made offensively and some of the returnees also that they got on offense as well, I think they're going to be okay there, and I think they are going to get better.
Right. And then one other question on spring practice. I listened to Kirby's presser yesterday, and you can kind of tell they're going to have the spring game, but it looks like going forward it's not like 100%. What's your thoughts on that? And I know there's not a lot of spring practice or spring games this past year or this season. So what's your thoughts on the whole spring practice and spring games going forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack when it comes to spring games. I know that Texas is going to be doing one. Nebraska is also not going to be doing one. And then Tennessee is doing a spring game, but they're not putting it on. It's not going to be nationally televised. I think they're doing some type of streaming format on TennesseeVols.com, whatever it is for them. So some interesting changes for spring games. But I think there's a lot to. It's not just about, because the biggest concern that a lot of coaches keep talking about is, oh, well, other people get to watch our players, and that's an opportunity for them to poach other guys off of our roster. I don't think you have to watch a spring game to be able to poach somebody off of their roster. Now, certainly it provides some more recent film on them and some more recent reps, and you get a better idea of what they look like now, maybe as opposed to they did 4 months ago at wherever university they were. But I think it's a lot, and I think these are two things that Georgia really considers is, one, this is an opportunity for fans that maybe don't get to go to games during the regular season that can't afford a spring game ticket and go watch their favorite football team in person. I think that's something that UGA certainly emphasizes for the spring game. It's something that they take into consideration when doing this event. But as far as like another thing that I don't think a lot of people mention, and something that Brooks has continued to pound on our show, is that it doesn't make any money for these universities. I mean, you're still having to hire security guards like you normally would for a game day. You're having to hire people to run parking lots and like merchandise and concession stand people and security in the stadiums and all that stuff. So you're still having to pay for all of that, but you're not charging your typical seat admission prices that you would for a regular season game in November or something like that. I mean, it's $5 a pop or something around there, or some places even do it for free. So this isn't a money-making type of game for these universities or these programs. And what we've learned about college football is everything gets tied back to money, or any business in this world. Everything gets tied back to money. So I think that could be an underlying reason of why a lot of teams are not doing these spring games. But from what it seems like, Georgia's going to keep doing their spring games. I don't think they have a plan. It's certainly not any plans this year of canceling it. They're going to have one. But I would imagine that they're going to keep doing spring games moving forward. But maybe they do something like Tennessee where it's not nationally televised or something like that. But I have no idea. But certainly interesting that there are a lot of changes coming to this. I thought it was kind of weird what Ole Miss did last year, where it's like they have some type of dunk contest and Joey Chestnut is out there eating 1 million hot dogs and stuff, and they're playing flag football. Like at that point, you might as well just cancel the spring game. But it's certainly a lot of changes, and just kind of fitting for the current climate we are in college football.
Yeah, crazy times. Also, I just think it's good for recruiting. You maybe have it another as a recruiting weekend, bring in some big-time recruits. Kirby's all about some recruiting, so we'll see. I'd miss it. I can see both ways, but I'd miss it just being more of a traditionalist. See some players you normally wouldn't get to see in April. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's that one fix of football that you get during this long off season. I mean, getting to watch just one football game, even if it is a scrimmage, and even if it isn't your typical college game day atmosphere. I mean, it's that one football game that you get to watch in the middle of this off season that kind of gets you over the rest of the way between May, June, and July, when it kind of really drags on, where you're like, I miss college football. So it's certainly nice having these spring games, and I certainly enjoyed it as a football observer and someone that gets to cover this football program. So I enjoy it as well. I hope they keep doing it, but we'll just have to see, I guess.
Yes, sir. Also, if no one didn't know, Jay Will is co-host, or he's on the Film Guide Network, which it has exploded and it's getting close. I got, as of now, looks like 45.6 thousand subscribers, which is awesome. You guys have grown so much. I remember, I think right when you guys started, maybe less than 5,000, but try to watch when I can. And you guys always have great productions and reviewing everything during there. So how have you seen it grown, and where are you guys upcoming and seeing?
Yeah, so this is I just ended my second year doing this with Brooks. When we first started, so when Brooks went from just him ISOing every night to then him hiring me and Christian Kirby, our other producer, I believe we had 12,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel, and now it's grown to what you just mentioned of almost 46,000 subscribers, creeping in on that 50K mark. Certainly a lot of growth. It's been a lot of fun for me. I certainly enjoy getting to talk Georgia football for 1 hour, and then also getting to branch out into some national college football for an hour as well. But yeah, it's been a joy. It's been a blast. I love working with those guys. Couldn't envision myself in a better place, especially someone that just graduated from college last year, having a spot where I immediately get to have a voice on a network like that, working with two great guys. and then also having a place where I can write articles over on Dawg's Daily SI for us as well. Getting to cover Georgia football and college football in general is what I always dreamed of. So getting to do it in this type of format, fresh into my young journalism career or media producing career, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's been a blast. Certainly, if you haven't checked it out, I encourage you to. Of any film breakdowns, you learn football, and then you also get to laugh and have some fun as well. I think that's what makes our program so unique and our show so unique, because you're going to learn football more than you ever would anywhere else. Obviously, I'm a little biased because that is who I do show with, but I truly believe that nobody does it like us, because you're going to learn football, you're going to learn football terms and how the game is structured, while also hearing us fire off some takes, laugh at each other, and do all that good stuff of covering college football.
Yes, sir. If you want to get nerdy and get deep in some plays, offense, defense, X's and O's, Brooks Austin's the man. Shut up and grind the tape, man. And I love the intro when he switches in and out that yeet, yeet, or whatever it was with
yeah, man.
That's good. Yes, great stuff there. Also, how do we follow you on social media?
Oh, yeah. Twitter, Dr._J-Will. You can see all my stuff that I post there, anywhere between articles or any more takes that I want to fire off, or on X, if that's what you call it. I'm still calling it Twitter. Always will call it Twitter. But yeah, Dr._J-Will. That's where you can find me on social media.
Yeah, J-Will Jonathan right here, and he's got over 4,000 followers, which is great. So yeah, follow him on there. And then also, he's writing, as you mentioned, on Georgia Bulldogs on SI. So check out all of his articles about Georgia football. Yeah, man. And really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thanks for inviting me back. Happy to do this anytime. Always glad to sit down and talk some Georgia football.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you coming on. And if you're still around, make sure to like, subscribe, share the Doghouse podcast. And we'll have more content coming up for the spring. It's getting closer and closer. I believe is it April 12th, I believe, is the spring game, I think. There you go. And I really appreciate you coming on. Go Dogs. Yeah, man. Yeah, thanks again for coming on, man. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy. But
oh, yeah, absolutely, man. Again, like I said, if you ever want me back on, all you got to do is shoot me a Twitter DM. If I can make it work in my schedule, I'll do it, man. I'll on here, give you 30 minutes or whatever you want. And so, yeah, again, I appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. And I'll probably edit this, may have it on Thursday or Friday, and I'll share it with you and everything.
All right. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, man, appreciate it.
Take care. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks so much.